This week's Torah portion is called Vayeilech, and it's Moses continuing to speak to the Jewish people. This day is his death day. It's the day he's going to die. It's also his birthday. We understand that Moses was born and died on the same day, that he lived 120 years, which is why we wish each other we should live for 120 years. And he was vigorous. He was a strong 120-year-old. And God comes to Moses in the Medrash and says, it's time for you to die. And Moses argues with God. He doesn't want to die. He wants to continue to live in the world. He wants to continue to praise God. And he says, haven't I been a faithful servant to you? Haven't I shepherded your flock? Haven't I done everything you wanted of me? I want to continue to live. And he argues with God. God says, no, it's time for you to die. He says, can I come back as an animal? I'll just be an animal. I want to stay in the world. God says, no, it's your time. He says, can I come back as a bird? He continues to argue with God. God says, enough, it's time for you to die. So he calls out to his angels to bring the neshama of Moses up into the highest realms. And he calls the angel Gabriel, and he says, Gabriel, go take the neshama, the soul of Moses. And Gabriel says, but he's like 600,000 righteous people. He's so holy. I can't take his soul. So God goes to Michael, it says in the Medrash, and says, Michael, you go and take the soul of Moses. And Michael says, but I was his teacher. I taught him. I can't take his soul. So God goes to the angel of death, and he says to the angel of death, you go and take the neshama, take the soul of Moses. So the angel of death wraps himself in anger, and he takes his sword and he goes to where Moses is writing the holy name of God. And Moses is shining. His face is like emanating light like the sun. And the angel of death comes to Moses and says, I'm gonna take your soul. And Moses says, you can't take my soul. He says, who are you, the angel of death? I'm the son of Avram. When I was born circumcised. And there was light filling the whole room when I was born. And I had an encounter with God at the burning bush. And I went and I brought out the Jewish people from the land of Egypt, from slavery. And I split the waters of the Red Sea. And I turned the bitter waters of Mara into sweet waters. And I shepherded the Jewish people across the desert. I've been God's faithful servant. You can't take me. So the angel of death goes back to God, and God sends him back. And he goes back. And now Moses has a stick with the name of God, and he beats the angel of death. And God says, I'll take your soul. A heavenly voice comes down and says, I'm going to take your soul. So down from the heavens come God, so to speak, with heavenly hosts, with all the angels. And God says to Moses, prepare for your death. And we learn in the Medrash that the angels, Michael, spread out a mattress for Moses to lie on. And the angel Gabriel puts a pillow under his head. And God says to Moses, prepare yourself to die. He says, close your eyes. So Moses closes his eyes. And he says, put your hands across your chest. And he puts his hands across his chest. And he says, straighten out your legs. And he straightens out his legs. And he says, God says to the neshama, to the soul of Moses, I created you, and I put you into the soul of Moses, into the body of Moses. And now your allotted time of 120 years is up. You've lived your full lifespan. You've done your job. It's time to come back into the heavenly realms. And the neshama argues with God and says, I don't want to leave. I've been in the body of Moses for 120 years. I love Moses. And my neshama, my soul, hasn't been corrupted by living in this body. I want to stay here. I want to be with Moses. I don't want to leave. And God says, I'll take you up into the highest of realms, and I'll put you under the heavenly throne, and you'll bask in divine light. And again, the neshama doesn't want to leave. And so God kisses Moses. And in that kiss, the soul leaves. And then God's self buries Moses. So this idea that the soul and the body are combined in life, and in death they separate, and the soul goes up into the higher realms and the body goes back into the ground. There's another medrash that teaches us that one of the Hasidic masters, the Baal Shem Tov, was offered by God the option to not die, to go full body and soul up into the highest realms, into the heavens. And the Baal Shem Tov said, no, I want to die. I want my body planted in the ground like a seed. The body in the ground is likened unto a seed. The seed is planted, it disintegrates, it becomes organic matter, and then from that seed comes a tree or a tomato plant or whatever, but something grows from that tree. And that's a way for us to understand that when our body is planted in the ground, it's like a seed. And there's a tradition that teaches that we have a special bone. It's called the luz bone. And the luz bone is in the back of our necks, and it is something that doesn't go into the ground. It doesn't disintegrate. It stays in our grave. And from that bone, the rest of us will be reconstituted at the time of Techiyat Ametim, of the resurrection of the dead. It's a fundamental Jewish belief that there will be a time after the days of the Messiah when all that has died, so to speak, will be brought back to life. Everything will be reconstituted. Everything will live again, and we will be reconstituted. Our body and our soul will come back together in a rarefied, purified form, and will live forever in divine light. That's the end goal. And in the meantime, we die. And God says to Moses, as much as Moses is arguing and doesn't want to die and wants to come back as a bird and wants to come back as an animal, just let me live, let me be in this world, let me proclaim your oneness and your goodness and be your servant in the world. And God says, no, your time is up, your allotted time is up. And then the Shama fights and wants to stay in the body of Moses. God says, no, you have to go the way of all men. All men will die. Until Techiyat Ametim, when there will be a resurrection of the body with the soul, and we'll come back and we'll live with divine blessing and divine light for all time. That's the end game. Techiyat Ametim, when everything will come back to life, and our body and soul will be reconstituted, like the seed going into the ground and growing into a tree. So at the end of days, when there's Techiyat Ametim, then there'll be Olam Haba, the world to come, and that will live for all eternity. There'll be no time. But we live in this world, and we who are alive today, thank God, are now coming up to Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur, on some level, can be seen as a near-death experience. We simulate death. We wear white clothing to remind us of the shrouds that we will be buried in, the white shrouds that are modeled after the clothing of the high priest on Yom Kippur. When he's asking forgiveness for the Jewish people, we wear white like the shrouds we're going to be buried in. And we don't eat, and we don't drink, and we don't put lotions on, and we don't wash ourselves, and we try to minimize the physical in order to have a sense that we are fleeting. And we read it in our liturgy. We're fleeting, we're only here for a short time. We do Yizkar on Yom Kippur to remember those who have predeceased us. We talk about who will live and who will die in the coming year. And so we focused a lot on Yom Kippur, on death and our own mortality. And we can perhaps understand death as something that is a gift. It's something that is our endpoint in this world. And when we embrace death, we can live more fully. And when we remember Moses, who didn't want to die, wanted to live in this world, wanted one more second in this world, however, whatever form I am, and then the neshama of the soul of Moses that didn't want to die, wanted to stay in this world. We faced with our own mortality at this time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and on Yom Kippur, when we're really, so to speak, fighting for our lives, to appreciate our lives, to appreciate that they will end, and to value every moment of life, and to live every moment of life with as much mindfulness and as much intention as we possibly can. Who is it that I am? What is it that I am? And what am I here for? And what do I want to do? And what do I bring into the world? And how can I be more the better me in the coming year? And I think when we read this week's Torah portion and we understand that Moses is about to die, and that God says it's your time is up, you're allotted 120 years are up, it's time to go, and he argues, and there's this whole medrash that speaks about taking of Moses' life, and in the end God kisses Moses and the soul leaves, the body gets planted in the ground, waiting for that time where they'll be reconstituted in the time after the days of Mashiach, when a Messiah, when there will be no more death, no more tears, just divine light. So in the meantime, let's live our lives with that same desire to live that Moses had, wanting to live, wanting to be productive, wanting to be good in the world. And please God, we should be blessed with a year that we can actualize as much of ourselves as humanly possible, and that we can be all that we can be. And I bless us, that God should bless us with a year, a sweet year, a good year, a year where we're able to be as good as we humanly can be.